All right, good evening, everyone. Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Actually, remember to say the page at the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi virtual edition. Second line from the top of the page. We asked the following question. Hiniach Oved Kochavim v'Havach Yisrael. Okay, let's say we're in the issue of Bishul Akum. So the non-Jew, before we were talking about the Jew lit the fire, he got things started, and the non-Jew finishes it up. Let's say it's reversed. Let's say what happens is um, the non-Jew he starts the cooking, and then the Jew does the flipping. Right, the Jew flips the burger. Is now what happens there? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says Kal v'chomer gamru biyado ve'kochavim muter. He says that's even more for sure permissible because if the non-Jew finishes the food, and again we're worried about connection between the chef and the person who is eating the food. So if we are considering that if the non-Jew finishes the food, that's still going to be okay, despite the fact that the non-Jew does most of the cooking. Gamru Briad Yisrael lo kol shkein. If a Jew actually finishes the cooking, even a non-Jew lights the barbecue, but the Jew flips the burgers, that's for sure okay. Okay, Itmar Nami has also been said. Amar Rav Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, V'Amri La, Amar Rav Acha Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Bein Shini Achovi Kochavim v'Hafach Yisrael. Does not make any difference whether the non-Jew puts it on the fire and the Jew flips it. Bein Shiniach Yisrael v'Hafach Ovi Kochavim, or the reverse, that the Jew put it on the fire and the non-Jew flipped it. Mutter, either way, that is permissible as long as the Jew is involved at some point during the cooking process. Veino Aser Ad Shetchila So v'Gamro B'Yadov Kam. The only time it becomes Bishul Akum as a problem is if there's no Jew involved with it from beginning to end, right? If the non-Jew is cooking it the entire time. Amar Ravina says Hilchasa. The halacha is Harifsa Dishagar Ove Kochavim. He says that this bread that was cooked in an oven, that the non-Jew started the fire, the Afa Yisrael. So and the Jew baked it, right? He put the bread into the oven. Inami Shagar Yisrael, or if the Jew starts the fire, va'afa ove kochavim, and the non-Jew bakes the bread, inami, or else Shagar ove kochavim va'afa ove kochavim, a non-Jew started the fire and a non-Jew cooked the bread, va'asa Yisrael v'haisa ba chasuye, and the chatuye, and the Jew comes along and he even adjusts the fire. Right, he moves the coals around. Shop your dummy. That's fine as long as there's a Jew involved at some point. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah. So do we hold by this today that as long as a Jew is involved somewhere, that's fine? The Jew doesn't have to necessarily begin the process, like light that pilot light.
It seems like lighting the pilot's like just the easiest way to go, right? You light that pilot and then you can just leave it alone for a while. But if Yehuda walked in late and they already started cooking, right? Then theoretically they could turn the fire off and Yehuda could turn it back on again.
Right.
Or they could have Yehuda pick the food up off the fire, put it back down again. Right?
Huh.
As long as he does some action, right? That will be acceptable in order to make it not a problem of Bishul Akum, which Jeff, you will recall, means food cooked by a non-Jew, which we can't then eat. Okay? See the article from the OU, which was actually an excellent article for the Daf. Really summarized the Daf very well, if you didn't read it. Okay. Dag Maliach. Now, what about foods that are not cooked, but they are prepared in other ways? So, for example, you have a salted fish, right? I assume that it's brine pickled. I guess it's probably how they did it, right? It was salted. It's eaten raw, right? So then Chizkiah says that's fine, right? Because there's no cooking at all. As we said, it needs to have a fire cooked on a fire. Rabbi Yochanan Osar, and Yochanan says that is prohibited because the salting is the way that the food becomes permissible. So therefore, it is being prepared by a non-Jew. It's inedible beforehand. Now it's edible. Rabbi Yochanan says that's still a problem. We do not hold that way. We hold that's permissible. Yehuda. Yes.
Also, part of the pickling process is you have to cook the vinegar with salt and the veggies all together for you as well.
So
that's what makes it.
Yeah. So this is gonna and the permissibility of that is gonna depend on what kind of vegetables it is, right? If it's the kind of vegetable that can be eaten raw, then as we said before, it's not going to be a problem. But if it's the kind of vegetable that cannot be eaten without being cooked, then if the non-Jew does cook that vegetable, then it would be prohibited. Okay. Beitza tzluya, a roasted egg, right? Non-Jew roasts it inside its shell. I guess hard-boiled, maybe, but it's roasted inside the shell. Bar Kapara Shari. Bar Kapara says that's permissible. He says because it is the non-Jew, even though he's actually doing the cooking, he never comes in contact with the edible portion of the egg. And he says there's an additional loophole, right? I suppose if one potentially would microwave something in a container and the non-Jew never touches it, right? According to Bar Kapara, it would be acceptable, but we do not hold that way. Rabbi Yochanan, also Rabbi Yochanan says that is prohibited, and we do not eat a boiled egg that a non-Jew makes. Ki also Rav Dimi Omar, Rav Dimi came from Israel. He said, "Echad dag maliach ve'echad beitza tzluya." Doesn't matter whether we're talking about a salted fish, talking about a roasted egg. Chizkiya bar kapara sharu. Chizkiya and bar kapara said those are permissible. Rabbi Yochanan, also Rabbi Yochanan said those are prohibited. Rav Chia Parva ikla bereish galusa. Next story is Rav Chia Parva. He went to the house of the Reish Galusa. Amrulei. So they said to him at the house of the Reish Galusa. Now the Reish Galusa, we said, was a political person, and he wasn't necessarily a big Torah scholar. And as this Gemara sort of seems to imply, they were prone to political questionable acts, we'll say. So what happens is Reb Chia Parva goes to the house of the Reish Galusa. Amrulei, they said to him, Beitza tzluya mai, what is the halacha about a roasted egg? Can we have a roasted egg that a non-Jew roasts? Amar lehu Chizkiya ubar kapara sharuv Rabbi Yochanan asar. He says, even though Chizkiya and Bar Kapara said it was okay, Rabbi Yochanan said it wasn't okay. And generally speaking, that's where the halacha is. Ve'ein devarav shel echad b'makom shnayim. And he says you can't overrule, right? You can't overrule the one, right? When there's two. Therefore, the halacha is like the two who overrule Rabbi Yochanan, and they're permissible. Amar lehu Rav Zvid. So Rav Zvid said to the people of the household of the Reish Galusa, lo sesitzule, right? You can't listen to what Rabbi Chia Parva says. That's not correct. Hachi Amar Abaye, because Abaye said halchasa, that he said the halacha is kavase the Rabbi Yochanan. The halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan, even though he's the minority. That's where the halacha is like. So ashkiyuhu neguta dechala v'naf nafshe. So the people from the Reish Galusa's household, they gave him a cup of vinegar, right? Because he was strict on them, told them that they could do something. They didn't like to hear that. He gave them a cup of vinegar, and Rav Zvid died. So whether it was intentional an assassination or however you read that Gemara, but yeah, they took him out because they did not like his position that we need to follow Rabbi Yochanan. Although that is what we do in practice nowadays. Tana Rabbanan Rabisert. Hakafrisin v'hakaplotos v'hamatalia v'chamin v'hakloyush bahen. So he says the kafrisin are the peels of the tzlaf fruit. Right? I'm not sure what that is. And the kaflotos is that's a cress. It's a cress, isn't it? The kafrisin, we're back with cress again. It's a cress and a fenugreek.
They say that the kafrisin is husks that cover caper berries.
That's what it is. Husks that cover caper.
Yeah.
Remember the outside. So it's the husks that cover caper berries, and kaflotos is leeks, and matalia and chamin, which is hot water. Matalia, here in my translation, we don't know what it is yet. The Gemara is going to explain. And haklayos, he says, is parched grain. So
here it says hemtalia. In English, it says hemtalia in the Art Scroll.
Yes, they don't translate it yet. So mutarin. All of those are permissible because they can be eaten in they're eaten in a raw state, right? They're all going to be eaten in the raw state. Beitza tzluya, roasted egg, is asura, is prohibited to eat from a non-Jew. Shemen, when it comes to oil, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Beis Dino, nimnu alav v'etziruhu. We already know that they permitted in the Beis Din that they were allowed to eat non-Jews oil now. Tanya hi. So we have a brisa that says He ha-metalia, he pashalia, he shiata. He says this metalia is the same thing as pashalia, which is the same thing as shiata. So we want to know my shiata. What is a shiata? Then that'll help us translate all of these other words that mean the same thing. So Amar Rabbi Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Barachana said Rabbi Yochanan, Ha-arba'in shnin denofik hai uvda Mitzrayim. There was 40 years since this story happened in Egypt. V'Rabbi Barachana di-day, Amar hashitin shnin denofik hai uvda Mitzrayim. And Rabbi Barachana, he said that this happened 60 years before in Egypt. V'lo pligi, they're not arguing. Mar bishanei, Mar bishanei. Each one of them told the story at a different time. One told the story 40 years after it occurred, and somebody else told the story 60 years after it occurred. Maisu Bizra de Carpisa, Ubizra de Kisna. So they brought seeds of karpas, which is
cress. Yep, exactly.
I was surprised at that because karpas was translated as celery in another earlier edition, an earlier part, but okay, so we can call it the cress. And they also brought bizra de kitna. They brought seeds of flax and bizra de shablilta, which was as fenugreek, seeds of fenugreek, which I don't know what a fenugreek is, right? But in any event, that's they brought these seeds.
Don't some say it's like squash or something like that? Is that?
I don't know what a fenugreek is. Yeah, I don't know.
Squash.
It's a squash, Brian, right?
Part of the squash family, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that. Fenugreek. I thought fenugreek was a country in Southern Europe.
Fenugreek is a plant. Fenugreek is a plant with culinary and medical uses, native to Mediterranean, Southern Europe, and Western Asia.
So there you go, Southern Europe.
Okay.
So there you are.
Gotta be a squash now.
Okay, now, so they had the seeds for all of these things. And what they did is, they put it into some lukewarm water, vishaku le ad demekabel, and then they placed them in the inside of this barrel. They mixed them all together, and they put them in this lukewarm water, and then they put it into this barrel on the sides of this barrel, and it sprouted almost immediately, right? Sprouted some sprouts, and then maisi chatz bechadati umolin maya. So they brought some new utensils and they filled them with water. V'taru behu gargishta, and they soaked them into some kind of a mud mixture. It's water and dirt together, which was called gargishta, a clay kind of a mixture, and they stuck it to the side of this barrel. V'ailin libe bani, and then they went into the bathhouse. Right? They'd say they got their seeds. They mixed almost like a chia pet kind of a thing, right? They mixed it up together, and then chia pets, right? Anyway, they stuck this to the inside of the barrel, and then they went to the bathhouse. And adenafku melavlavi. By the time they came out, it sprouted. The achli minaihu, and they ate from these whatever this growth was. It was a mixture of 3 different seeds, but they ate from this. The kairi mibinta dereshaihu ad tufra dekaraihu. One of the things they wanted to do when they came out of the bathhouse was to chill, right? They needed to chill off because the bathhouse would raise their body temperatures. And so they came out and they tasted these seeds, and it chilled them from the tips of the hair of their head to their toenails, made them completely cool off their entire bodies from this item. That's what this shiata is. Shiata, which is pashalia, matalia, this kind of I guess it's eaten raw, and that's why non-Jews are allowed to serve it to you. Amar Ravashi, Amar li Rabbi Chanina. So Ravashi said about this story. Rabbi Chanina told him, he says, Milin, that's very nice. It's just a story. It's just words, right? Didn't really happen. It's a good story. And Va'amri le bimilin. Some said he said this was done with words, meaning with witchcraft, right? Naturally, the seeds should not have sprouted so quickly. And the fact that they did indicates that there was some witchcraft involved. So to be avoided.
I mean, are we trying to suggest that these seeds are the shiata seed?
That's what we're trying to say, yes. I think so. That's what because that was the reason why we brought this story up, right? What is shiata? And we told the story about 40 years ago in Egypt. Okay, Tanarabanim. Hakufsan shel ovde kochavim shehuchmu chamim biyora gedola. Okay, so he says that we've got this, I think Art Scroll calls it mark date water, which I think is after you brew date beer, right? The remnants from that brewing process is some kind of a sediment of dates, and that's what this was. So if you've got this, they made this beer from this, and they put they warmed. They used to, and it gave off some kind of a heat, or else they used it as charcoal in order to light, as coals or something. But they warmed up their hot water with this. Beyora Gedola. So if they took the, one second, what did he do? He used the, no, they took the water. So they took water and they were boiling this dates, I think is what they're doing in order to brew their beer. And he brews it inside of a pot that it belongs to a non-Jew. That's what's happening here. So he brews it inside of a pot that belongs to the non-Jew. If the pot that belongs to the non-Jew is very large, then it's going to prohibit the beer that's inside the container. Why? Because we are concerned that the non-Jew's pot, being not kosher, as it heats up, is going to release the flavors of non-kosher food that's inside the pot. And if you've got a very large pot, you've got a large surface area, and therefore there's a lot more flavoring that gets exuded from the pot, and that's where you have problems. But biyora ketana, if the pot is small, so then it's mutter, then it's acceptable, then it's okay, right? So it would seem to be that you have to compare volumes of the utensil to the volume that it holds. So when we're talking about size, right, we're talking about increasing the surface area of the utensil relative to the amount of liquid that's inside of it. And so that's where you come up with the problem. So we got to know, what is a small utensil that we're talking about? Some Rabbi Yanai explains, if you can't get a bird called the dror bird into it, then that's a very small container. Now, the reason why, I take all the things I said back. I'm mistaken now that I'm reading it through. Take what I said back about the surface area relative to the liquid. The issue is, now I'm understanding. You have the large pot, and if it's a large pot, a non-Jew likely cooked his non-kosher food in there, and therefore it's absorbed flavors. Then you're going to cook your item inside of it. It's going to absorb those prohibited flavors. If he has a very small pot, then that pot is not usable for cooking. And as a result of it being not used for cooking, he could not have put his non-kosher food in there and cooked in it, and therefore it's fine. Imagine measuring spoons, right? If the non-Jew has got some, teaspoons, he clearly didn't, use it for cooking anything inside of it, because the teaspoons themselves wouldn't be able to hold anything. So therefore, if I've got a very small container that's so small that it doesn't fit the dror bird, which is a very small bird, inside of it, so that he couldn't get the non-kosher meat inside of such a pot, that pot was never used for cooking non-kosher flavors. And therefore, that's why cooking in that pot is acceptable. It has nothing to do with the surface area. I thought it did when I read it first. Now I'm thinking it right. Okay, yes, Yehuda.
And so another thing, probably, if you cook not Jewish food and use it with an onion, it absorbs the flavor, and that makes it even more. That makes it even more not kosher because of the.
No, hang on to your issue with onions and sharp flavors, because we're gonna. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but it might be tomorrow. But that issue of sharp flavors and things is going to come up tomorrow, right? Yehuda's pointing out that when we talk about flavors that are being absorbed, right now we're talking about non-extra spicy types of items that are extra absorbent of flavors, right? We're just talking about, he's got a regular container, he's boiling his date beer, and he's using a pot that cooked the drawer soup for the non-Jews. Okay, so now, question is, so let's say the pot is too small, it can't fit a drawer bird inside of it. Why couldn't you cut the drawer bird into small pieces and put it inside the pot, and then you could have cooked the food in a non-kosher way inside of that pot? Ella kol she'ein rosh tzipor dror yochel yikanes v'socha. Rather, it has to be that it is so small that the head of the drawer bird could not fit in. In that circumstance, then it's too small. Even if you cut it into reasonable pieces, it would be too small to cook in. And so therefore, that pot can be presumed to not have been used for prohibited flavors. Okay, but we have a brisa. We're going to show a contradiction. Achas yoreh gedol achas yoreh ketana mutter. Doesn't matter whether you have a large pot or a small pot. It is going to be permissible, right? And we just said that it is prohibited to cook this in a large pot that belongs to a non-Jew. Lo kasha. It's not a contradiction. Hakiman damar nosein tam lifgam aser. Hakiman damar nosein tam lifgam mutter. There's going to be a argument that we're going to have later on, and that is that once flavors get absorbed into a pot, right? Any food item, after it gets left out, starts to go bad. After 24 hours, that food is considered to be spoiled, and the taste that it imparts is going to be a negative taste. So if you've got a pot that has not been used for 24 hours, so then any taste that's in that pot will not produce a positive taste. There is an argument, which we will discuss later on, whether that bad flavor can make something non-kosher, right? Is it that a non-kosher flavor that enhances a kosher dish prohibits the kosher food? Or is it even if the non-kosher flavor is detrimental to the kosher product, does it make it non-kosher? And so therefore, this pot that we're arguing about is a pot which is, Jeff's got my United States, the pro-United States shirt on today also. Everybody comes out with their colors at the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi. But the point is that if the flavor that comes out of this pot, the flavor will come out of this pot, it might not make it not kosher. That's the bottom line. It doesn't make it not kosher because it imparts a bad flavor. But another opinion says even though it doesn't impart a bad flavor, it still makes it non-kosher. Okay. Fine. Amar of Sheshes, which says, Hi mishcha shlika deramai. What about cooked oils that the Arameans used to make? So that's usher. That's prohibited. So Amar of Safra, lemay nechushla. What are we worried about when it comes to this cooked oil that non-Jews had? So imishum iaruve, if you're concerned that they're going to mix wine into it, and wine we understand why there'll be a prohibition. So mesra sari. So then wine is not going to add a positive flavor to oil. So that would not be something that they would add. Imishum bishuli ovde kochavim, if you're worried about it is food cooked by a non-Jew, so then nechahu kamoshuchai. Why should you worry about that? You can eat oil raw, right? It doesn't have to be cooked. So therefore, why should you be worried about cooked oil? If you're worried about that it was cooked, that maybe this oil got cooked in a utensil that a non-Jew used to cook his non-kosher food previously, so then it is going to give off a bad flavor and will be permissible. Therefore, he disagrees, right? It's not true. It's not going to be this cooked oil is not going to be a problem at all. Okay. So, Bomine Miribiasi. Next question. We asked for Biasi the final question. Ha ahini shilki daramai mai. So he says this. What about these dates that are cooked? These boiled dates that these Arameans, that's one of their food that they cook. What is the halacha there? Is it a bishul akum problem? Is a food cooked by non-Jew problem or not? He says, if you're talking about sweet dates, that those can be eaten without cooking, then there's no question at all, right? Merire, if they're bitter dates, loti boyach devadi asiri. Of course, those are prohibited. You can't eat the bitter dates without cooking them. Kiti boilach, the question is mitzi oe. We're talking about dates that are in between. What is the halacha there? And this is where I can't remember how we brought it up yesterday in amongst our discussion. What if you have a food that most people eat raw, but some people eat it cooked, right? In this circumstance, they're the reverse, right? Most people are eating this cooked. Some people can eat it raw. What happens then? So Amar Luhus,
we're talking about fish in this situation.
So there's a fish. Yes, that's what we were talking about. Thank you, Yehuda. Yes. So we're talking about fish, a certain type of fish in that situation. So we said we were going to get to it. So Amar Luhus said to him, Mighty boy, what is your question? De Rebbe Asar Umanu Levi. So he says, our Rebbe said that this is prohibited. If most people eat it, you have to go by with the way most people eat. Most people eat this cooked, even though some people eat it raw, it is prohibited. And by the way, who is the Rebbe that they were talking about? They were talking about Levi. Okay, next. Next case. Shesisa. This is a food that was made with parched grains, right? So Rav said it was permissible, and Avodah Shmuel v'Levi Asri. And the father of Shmuel and Levi, they said it was prohibited. So the Gemara explains, Bechite usa'ari, if you're talking about parched grain, that is wheat or barley, kuli amalo pligi deshari, that's for sure going to be permissible because this cooked item that they were making, there was no vinegar in the ingredients. So it was just parched grain. And we said the parched grain was going to be not a problem. So tiflof dechala, if you're talking about the lentil types, so then they would put vinegar into the lentil type. So kuli amalo pligi. So we already know that once you put vinegar in it, we have a problem of yayin nesach, right? We have a problem. We don't know where the wine came from. That's going to be a problem. So therefore, once you put vinegar in it, nobody can eat that. That's for sure not kosher. Ki pligi betelofchi demaya. The question is, what if you've got lentils and they added water to it? So Mar Savar, one opinion holds, Gazrin and Ha'otuha, that we made a rule. Don't eat this talafche, don't eat this lentil food, because sometimes they put vinegar in it, and even if they don't put vinegar in it, we're worried that you might make a mistake and grab the non-kosher one instead of the kosher one off the shelf. And Umar Savar Lo Gazrin, the other said, no, different products. People can see the difference. Yes, Brian.
Just to go back on the grain, I mean, you said a lentil, but isn't that pas akum? Is that pas akum regardless if it's
they didn't actually make it into bread, right? And pas akum, as we discussed, isn't going to be prohibited. It'll be better not to eat it in any event.
Better not to. Okay, right. So
pas akum is going to be more of a chumrah or stringency as opposed to, it's questionable whether that enactment was repealed, whether it wasn't repealed. So I always get a little bit confused, to be honest, Brian, about where the boundary between Bishul Akum and Pas Yisrael is, right? Because if a non-Jew, even if a non-Jew cooks it, it becomes a problem of Bishul Akum anyway. Where does Pas Yisrael come from? And so I'm always a little bit confused by it, and I don't have it exactly straight in my own head. But that being the case, yes, Yehuda. Yehuda's got it.
Pas Yisrael, could that maybe mean that the Jew could turn on the oven's elements and cook the bread?
That's how I sort of understand it, Yehuda. Yes, that Bishul Akum got taken care of because the Jew put the ovens on, and it's still Pas Akum because the non-Jew needed the bread and cooked and made the loaf of bread and put it in the oven. And so that might be the stringency. Yes, Dad.
I think Pas Akum, I mean, the Bishul Pas Yisrael have to do with old wheat.
I don't think that Pas Yisrael has to do with whole wheat. You could have Pas Yisrael that's not whole wheat. Now, there's other issues of Yashan and all of that stuff, which we're not touching and getting into. Those are other areas of halacha as well. But I don't think that Pas Yisrael has to do with whole wheat. But I can be mistaken. I could look up and see. But every time I read something about how Pas Yisrael works versus Bishul Akum, whatever, the two things never get put in the same article together. So I'm always a little bit confused. So I will admit that's an area I'm confused in. Now, Ve'ika de Amri. So there are those. I'm sure it's not something that's all that confusing. I'm just saying this is something that confuses me. Ve'ika de Amri, those say that when it comes to this lentil product, if you put water in it, they all said don't eat it because sometimes you'll wind up with the one with vinegar in it. The argument was even the one made out of wheat and barley, that they said that they even made a rabbinic enactment to not eat that product, even though it's not even lentils. It's wheat and barley, but nevertheless, it's the same type of product. So they said stay away from that because you might get the lentil one that does contain vinegar. And Umar Savar Logos, and the other says we don't make a rabbinic enactment on it. Okay, we don't have that food anymore, so that's probably not something we're going to run into in the store. Amar Rav Trei Mini Shisisa. So he says, let's say we've got two types of food. So two types of this shisisa, right? One is made from parched grain, shadar barzilai hagiladi David. So that is what David, the Barzilai, who was a non-Jewish supporter of David Melech, when he got when his son rebelled, if you recall back in our Sanhedrin days, right? Avshalom rebelled against David and he leaves. And he has to leave so fast that he doesn't have enough supplies to support the people that went with him. And Barzillai, who was not Jewish, came along and he supplied David Amelech, and we're told that he supplied him with two types of shisisa, his people. So the question is going to be, how do we know that? Because Pasuk says, Mishkov Visapos, he gave them beds, right? He came out and supplied David's troops. He gave them beds, Visapos, which is utensils to use, Klei Yotzer, he brought them earthenware utensils, and Chitim, Usaorim, he brought them wheat and barley, Vikemach and flour, Vikuli and parched flour, Upul and beans, Vadoshim and lentils, Vikuli and parched flour, again. So now we've got two types of parched flours, right? Udvash, he brought them honey and chema and all these different delicacies. Now, Vahashahu Demafki, so therefore, he brought these multiple dishes out. So therefore, right, we see that both of these types of products must have been acceptable to use, right? So Vahashtahu to come mapki tsani l'shuki denado. Now we see non-Jews, they're taking baskets and baskets out, and the Jews are buying from it. Nobody seems to be worrying about this rabbinic enactment of Shmuel and Levi to stay away from this, right? It seems to be that from even David's time it wasn't an issue, and it doesn't seem to be an issue now. People are not worrying about it. So in practice, people weren't concerned. Okay, next. Kvashin, the next thing that the Mishnah says that we can't eat but are permissible to have benefit from are pickled vegetables. Shadarkan would take Pesach and Yayin. Why? Because they could put wine into the brine in order to help it pickle. So Amar Chizkiah lo shanu ella shedarkon aval biyadua asra filu bano. This is only talking about if you have a product that it makes sense that they could put wine in it. If you know they put wine in it, then it's prohibited to get any benefit out of. Then you know it's yain nesach. This is a rabbinic enactment because you can't eat it because maybe there's wine in it. So therefore, that you're going to stay away from and not eat it. But benefit isn't prohibited unless you know. Yes, Yehuda.
Because wherever I work, when I make the pickled veggies, we use like white vinegar. We use like pickled seasoning. We don't use wine in any of our recipes for the pickles.
So vinegar itself was wine at one time. It depends on the vinegar, not white vinegar.
We use white vinegar for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Jeff.
So there's a kosher herring that's made in wine marinade with onion.
Yeah. There you go. So that needs to be from kosher wine. That wine needs to be supervised, right? You can't rely on a non-Jew just saying, we got, wine vinegar and we put that in there, right?
Okay, so the wine I buy at Sobeys with the hechsher's okay.
That's correct, exactly, yes.
All right, thank you.
But that's where kosher supervision, if you go back in history 100 years, there weren't supervisions on products. People read ingredients and decided whether it was kosher or not. And that's what this Gemara is basically telling you, under what circumstances you can rely on things being kosher or not. This great article about Coca-Cola that Jews just presumed when they're drinking, they all drank Coca-Cola when they came over for Europe, what could be in Coca-Cola. And they did not know that Coca-Cola had glycerin in it, which is actually an animal fat byproduct, and it was completely not kosher. And when they looked into it, they found out about it. There's a great story about one Rav in Atlanta who pointed this out, and the people from Coca-Cola wanted it to be the all-American drink, and they wanted to make sure all Americans could drink it, and they changed their ingredients so that Coca-Cola would be kosher. But we just presume certain things would be kosher and they didn't have extras on things. So, this is what could as based on this Gemara, why would they say it was okay? Because what could possibly be in it, right? So, Brian, yes.
So I had to ask AI about Pas Yisrael. So the only answer I got was from the Ramah. And Shulchan Aruch
Kuf Yud Gimel, right?
Kuf Yud base.
Kuf Yud base.
Yeah, Kuf Yud base. Yeah, writes that Pas Akum is permitted in cases where there is no concern of intermarriage or other social. So is it just the Gezerah? Because we said it was the right.
That's what we said. It's not. Even though other things that we are worried about, that issue applies. It seems like Pas Yisrael was not kept from generation to generation.
Interesting. Okay.
Aaron.
I just wondering what's the application of these laws in countries where they ban, for example, pig and wine. Like Morocco, for example,
Yeah.
People cannot have pig. There's no pig consumption there or wine. What happens in that situation?
Yes. So the only thing number one to worry about is that anything that has any animal product in it is going to be problematic because they're not, non-Jews are not shechting properly. So every animal that they slaughter is not going to be kosher. So you do have to worry about their utensils being not kosher and anything that if they cook inside of a non-Jewish utensil. Now, if you have a factory that makes some product and it's a product that the only potential ingredient that they would be adding would be problematic, would be wine to it, then yeah, you probably have a lot more leniencies that you could rely on in those countries. That seems to be the general flow of this Gemara, right? Don't eat this because you might, and we're going to see it's going to continue on when it talks about meat and fish and all of these kinds of, and location. Actually, it's going to be very clear because the Gemara is going to talk about a location where there were certain places that certain non-kosher fish didn't exist, and you could eat products that you couldn't eat other places because there was no concern for it. Dad.
It's an interesting story about Coca-Cola after the Arabs, in, I think, 47, after they tried to boycott companies like Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola refused to go along with the boycott, how the OU bent over backwards to give them a heck show without knowing all the ingredients. A very interesting story.
So
but I'm not going to tell it here.
Coca-Cola has a long history, right? Coca-Cola has a long history. And of course, they have their yellow cap kosher Pesach. So yes, Coca-Cola is a great Jewish story. Okay, so now the question is going to be, Umayshna Mimurius, right? Deshor Rabbanan Behana. So why is it that if they put vinegar or wine into these items, so he said you can't eat them, but you're not allowed to get benefit if you knew that the wine is in there. So what about Murius? Murius was a cooked food that they also had pieces of fish inside, and the Chachamim said you're allowed to get benefit, even though many of the non-Jewish Murius salesmen would add wine to their product. So Hassam, the answer is labure zuhama. The reason why they put the wine in there was to get rid of any bad flavors or bad smells from the fish. That's why they were adding their wine. Hacha, but here, lematuke tama, it's for the benefit of the product. It actually helps the taste. Therefore, again, if the wine is there and it's still present, so then that's why you're going to not get any you can have a problem of getting benefit because the wine is actually going to add the taste. It's going to give you benefit. So therefore, that's where you have to worry about it. But if you're going to have a product where putting the wine in doesn't provide you any benefit because the product still smells like dead fish, right? It just smells less like dead fish. That's not going to be that's not where the Rabban are going to say there's prohibition of getting any benefit. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Amar biyadua nami mutter. Right, Rabbi Yochanan says that when it comes to pickled vegetables, even if you know they put the wine in, even then it is permissible. My shna mi murius l'Rabbi Meir de Alserbana. How's he going to explain how that's different than according to Rabbi Meir, who actually says that murius is going to be prohibited from getting benefit because we said Rabbi Meir again is choshesh lemiut and he's going to worry about the potential that the wine got added. The answer is we're in Lamed Testament Aleph. Hasam yedia mamasho hacha lo yedia mamashan. He says the distinction is going to be whether the product becomes visible or whether the product is so mixed in it becomes non-visible, non-distinct. It's already mixed into the product so much, and that's why you don't have to worry about it. That's why it's not going to be a problem of a prohibition of getting any benefit. Okay, next. The Mishnah says other non-Jewish foods that you're not allowed to eat, but you can get benefit from it is Taurus trufa v'tzir she'imba daga, right? So he says that when it comes to this chopped up taurus fish, and then we've got this that they don't have this fish that's floating around in it that swims around. Apparently there was some kind of a fish that would float around in the kosher chopped up fish, but not in the non-kosher version. And one of the other things on the list is chiluk. Yes, Yehuda.
it's here in Africa said and minced terrace and brine. That does not have a kilbis fish.
That's right, the kilbis fish. The kilbis, that's the fish that floats around in it. Okay, so now, what is the chiluk that the Gemara says you're not allowed to buy from the non-Jew? So he says, Amar of Nachman Rab, Amar Rav, sultanis, it's the sultanis fish. It's a very small fish that is kosher. Why is it prohibited for you to buy it from a non-Jew? Arvona ola ima. Because the arvona fish, when you catch this fish, the arvona fish swims around with them and then it gets mixed in. So when they chop up the fish and they sell it, you get pieces of non-kosher arvona fish mixed into it. And that's why you can't have it. And we said if you go to an expert, then it is okay because they take out the non-kosher fish. Tanar Rabbanan, ein lo achshav ve'asid ligadel, right? If you have a fish, part of this chiluk fish, the issue was that you couldn't look at it and tell if it has fins, it has no fins and scales because it will develop them later on. So you're farming it when it's young, so it doesn't have any fins and scales, so it's easy to confuse it with the non-kosher fish. So any fish that has no signs of kashrus on it now, but in the future it's going to grow fins and scales, li'achar zman, kigon hasultanis, like the sultanis fish, ve'ha'ofitz, or the ofitz fish, which I don't know what those are, harezem mutar, these are permissible fish, because they will eventually grow fins and scales. Even if they don't have them, you can eat them when they don't have their fins and scales, because that species does have fins and scales. Yeshlo achshav ve'asid lehashir, let's say you have a fish that has fins and scales, and then eventually the fins and scales fall off as it grows up, when they take it out of the water, kigon akonos ve'aponos, kitas patios ve'ach sepatios ve'otnos, like all of these types of fish. These are names of fish that I don't know. So then those are mutter, those are also edible and fine, because as long as they have fins and scales when they're in the water, then even if the fins and scales are gone when you take them out, those are still going to be kosher fish. Achriz Rabbi Yavo Bekesari. So Rabbi Yavo made the following pronouncement in Caesarea. Kirve dogim ve'iburon, the fat of fish, and also the roe of fish, that's the caviar, the fish eggs. Niklim mikol adam. You can buy those from anybody. You don't need hechsher. You can eat those from anybody. Why? Because cheskoson einan boin ella mi palosa. This is as Aaron had pointed out. The answer in this city, all of the fish fats came from a place called Palosa and Aspamia, and those only they didn't have any non-kosher fish in those areas. So therefore, if they were the ones selling caviar and all the fish, right? If you got if you had a factory that sold trout, right? And then that factory started selling caviar, they have no other fish there other than trout. That must mean that it's kosher roe, right? That's basically what the bottom line of it is. So therefore, that's fine. Kihadam Rabbi, like Abaye said, Hi tzachanasa debav debov nara. There's tzachat the fish that is in the river of Dabav, the sultanis fish. So sharia, those are permissible. Even though we said that the chiltis fish are going to be problematic, we're going to stay away from them. The sultanis fish is because you can confuse it with non-kosher fish. In those areas, it is fine. Why? My time, what's the reason for that? Maybe it's because that river flows very fast. V'hai dug tame kaven de leis lechut hashedra. Some non-kosher fish, the non-kosher fish that you would mix it up with, doesn't have a spine. So therefore, it couldn't live in fast-running water. So beduchta deradife maya lo matzikai, it can't live in the running water. That can't be the answer because hakka chazina dekai. We have seen the circumstance where those fish do live in fast-running waters. It must be because it's salt water. That river's salt water. The high dug tame cave in lu kalpi, and since this non-kosher fish does not have scales, can't live in salt water. But we see that non-kosher fish without scales live in salt water also. So that's not a reason. The answer is because that river, the Dabav River, has a lot of silt on the bottom, and therefore the non-kosher fish that doesn't live there. And therefore, the non-kosher fish don't live there. If you pull up enough sultanas fish, you're not going to get any non-kosher fish mixed in, and therefore it's okay. Amar Ravina says, Ha'idna t'kashafchi be nar goza nar gamda. They have since redirected the Goza River and the Gamda River into the Bevav River, and as a result, Asiri. Now it's got non-kosher fish in there, and therefore now you can no longer eat the sultanas fish from that location. Amar Abai says, Hai chamra di yama. If you have a sea donkey, I don't know what a sea donkey is, but if you have, I don't know if they're like seahorses, but they probably are not because these are kosher fish. The sea donkey is a kosher fish, and Torah diyama and a sea ox is osir. That's a prohibited one. Yes, Yehuda. You're on mute. Yehuda, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sea donkey is a nickname, not a scientific name for a greater amberjack fish.
Okay, so there you go. So now, the way that you can remember which one is kosher, which one's not, is tamei tahor, tahor tamei. The non-kosher animal is the kosher fish, and the kosher animal is the non-kosher fish. Amar Rav Ashi says, shafar nuna, the shvar fish is shari, is permissible to eat. Kadesh nuna, the kadesh fish is also prohibited. And v'simonech, the way that you can remember is kodesh la Hashem. The one that says that's called the kodesh is for Hashem. You can't eat it, right? It's kodesh la Hashem. That's right on the tzitz. It's just a clever way of remembering which one's the kosher fish, which one's not. Ikadamri, those who say kvar nuna, it is called the kvar nuna, the kvar fish, and also it is prohibited to eat. V'simonech, the way you can remember that is kivrei ovdei kochavim, right? The graves of non-Jews, which are tamei. And so, therefore, this is a non-kosher fish as well. Rabbi Akiva ikla leginzak. Rabbi Akiva went to a place called Ginzak. They brought him a certain type of fish, chipusha, right? Dehavadami chipusha. And it looked like a fish, which was the chipusha fish, which is not kosher. So, chafye bidikula, so he put it into a basket, right? Chaza be kalfi, and he shook it around, and by rubbing against the side of the basket, the scales fell off of it, right? Visharye, and therefore he said it's got fins and scales. It's permissible. This fish is good. Rav Ashi ikla timaduria. So Rav Ashi went to a place called Timaduria. They brought him a certain fish. Davadame litzlofacha. They brought him a fish that looked like it's lofacha, which is a non-kosher fish. Naktade lahadiyoma. He said, I don't know. I gotta hold it up to the light. And he saw when he looked up close in the light that it had little scales, very small scales sprouting from it, and therefore it was kosher fish. Sharyeh. Rav Ashi iklahu, also Rav Ashi went to a certain place. He saw a fish which was like the shfarnuna fish, which we said was a kosher fish. He put it in a white utensil because the scales were black, and then he could be able to see the contrast. Chaza be kalfi, and he saw the scales in that way. Visharyeh, and he permitted that fish. Rabbi Bar Chana ikra de'agma. So Rabbi Bar Chana went to a place called Akra de'agma. Krivule tzach nasa. They brought him some sultanis fish, like we said, this little small fish that you're not supposed to eat. Right? Sham lahu gavra dehava korile bate. He heard that this person was calling this sultanis mixture that was called the bate mixture, and the bate is a non-kosher fish. So Amar midika korile bate, he says, from the fact that they're calling this bate, shma mina davar tomer isbe. They must be something non-kosher in it. Why would they have the nickname for it, a non-kosher nickname? Lo achumini, he did not eat from it. So Litzafra in the morning, when he could see by better light, Ayin Bey, he looked more closely, Ashkich Bey Davar Tamei, and he found that there were non-kosher fish mixed in with the sultanis fish. And so therefore, Kori Nafshi called upon himself, Lo Ye'une Litzadik Kol Oven, that Hashem takes care of the righteous and prevents them from having any sins, right? He's like, I held myself back from eating the fish, and then it turns out it wasn't kosher in the end. So I'm glad I didn't have it. Vakorit Shel Chiltis. The next thing that you can't eat is the part of a fruit which is called the chiltis, which is kind of like a spicy seed. So the Gemara says, "My time." What's the reason? Mishum de mafsiki le bisakina. The answer is that in order to cut this item open, the non-Jews would use a knife in order to cut it open. And the problem is that the knife that they're using is not kosher. Now, the problem here is that we said that tastes are not transferred without heat, and there's no heat here. So this is where Yehuda's point about the onion comes in. This seed was sharp, it had a sharp flavor, and with the knife touching against the sharp flavor, it was able to take out the flavors, absorb the flavors even without heat. And so therefore, as Yehuda says, if you have an onion or a jalapeno or other kind of really sharp food, if you cut into it with a non-kosher knife, even though it's cold, it can absorb the flavors. We are on 39A, probably 3, 2. Okay, 39A2. So a 39A2, Jeff. So, and on the, another explanation is that we must be talking about a knife that's still dirty, right? It had fat. They just finished cutting non-kosher meat, and they went right from the non-kosher meat to cut this item, and so it's actually being mixed with non-kosher flavors. Even though we said that if it gives a bad flavor, it's going to be permissible. So agav churfei dechiltisa mechal yale sham nunisa. This is because it's so sharp, so then it's going to sweeten the bad flavors of the oil that are absorbed in the knife, and it's going to make it so that the flavors are positive, and you're not allowed to eat it. And it becomes like it's giving a positive flavor, and therefore it is prohibited. That's why you can't eat these seeds, because the non-Jews are using their knives to cut them open. Avdei de Rabbi Levi, the servant of Rabbi Levi, he became a chiltisa salesperson. So kinach nafshei de Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Levi died. Also, the Kame de Rabbi Yochanan, they came before Rabbi Yochanan. They want to know him, and they want to know, can we keep buying from him? Right? We presume that it was under the supervision of Rabbi Levi up until this point. Can we still buy from him? So Amruleh, they said to him, what can we buy it from him? Amarlahu, he said to them, Avdo shel chaver harehu kechaver, the servant of a chaver, somebody who has taken upon themselves extra stringencies, extra severe stringencies. His servant is considered to continue to do those same stringencies. So therefore, even though, right, he has no reason to change his recipe, he would be fine to follow, and you can continue to eat from him. So the Gemara wants to point out similar things like this. Rav Huna bar Manyumi zovan techelta me'anshi debese de Rav Amram Chasida. Rav Huna bar Manyumi, he bought tchelas. He bought this dye that you would use for on your tzitzis. He bought the tchelas from people from the Rav Amram's wife's house. Okay, so after Rav Amram had passed away, so his wife was selling tchelas. Now, tchelas was forged. It was commonly forged, and so therefore it needs a hechsher in it. You need to be able to certify that it actually was real tchelas. So also the comment to Rav Yosef, they came to Rav Yosef and they say, can we continue to buy from his wife, right? He's not supervising the product anymore. Can we trust his wife now? So lo hava biyadeh, he didn't know the answer. Paga be Chanan Chayata. So Chanan Chayata, who's I think means the tailor, Amar Le, he said to him, Yosef anya minale. So he says, Rav Yosef, right, the poor one who didn't know the answer to this. Why would you wouldn't know this? You wouldn't know this halacha. Where could you know this halacha from? But it happens to be you came to the right place to ask the question, because such a case happened to me. Because we were buying tchelas from the people of the wife's house of Rav Na, Achuha de Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who was the brother of Rav Chia bar Abba. Vasle kami de Rav Masna. We came before Rav Masna, and he didn't know the answer to that either. So therefore, also the kame de Rav Yehuda mehagronya. And so we went to Rav Yehuda from Hagronya, Amarli, and he told me, Nafalta liyad, he says, you have fallen into me, meaning that you have, again, same idea. You've come to the right place. You can't happen to come to somebody who knows the halacha, that Hachi Amar Shmuel, this is what Shmuel said, Eishes chaver harei kechaver. A wife of a chaver, of a stringent person, is herself also considered to be presumed to be keeping those similar stringencies. The wife of a chaver is also like a chaver. Avdosha chaver chaver. The servant of a chaver has the same stringencies as a chaver. A chaver is a person who has taken additional stringencies upon himself to keep laws of purity in a higher way and to be very careful with trumos, maestros, and kashrus. So therefore, he's taking on all these stringencies. So they're reliable. Chaver shemes, if the chaver himself dies, isho banav ubnei beso hareim peches kasan, his wife, his children, and his entire family are presumed to continue in that same in the same stringencies. Ad she yechashdu, until you have reason to suspect them. V'kain chotzer hamochrim batchelas. So too, if you have a courtyard area, a place that they're selling tchelos there, harehi becheskasa ad she tipasel. So you don't have to presume that they're selling the fraudulent item as long as they have the chazaka that they're selling the accurate item. You can rely upon that for that to continue. Tanar Rabbanan Eshes Am Haaretz, a wife of an Am Haaretz, a person who has no knowledge, right? If the wife of a person who doesn't keep halacha well, the nises lechaver, let's say she marries a chaver now. V'chein bito shel Am Haaretz nises chaver, or the daughter of an Am Haaretz, and she marries a chaver. V'chein avdo is a servant shel Am Haaretz, nimkar lechaver. He was a servant of an Am Haaretz, he gets sold to a chaver. Now, what's his case? Is he like an Am Haaretz or is he like a chaver? Kulan tzrichen lekabel divrei chaveros. They have to make a statement that they are accepting upon themselves the stringencies of a chaver. They have to make that statement. We're no longer keeping our old ways. We are now transferring our ways over. Aval eishes chaver, but the other way, the wife of a chaver, shenisis haaretz, and she gets remarried to an Am Haaretz. V'chein bito shel chaver shenisis Am Haaretz, or the daughter of a chaver who marries an Am Haaretz. V'chein avdo shel chaver shenimkar Am Haaretz, or the other way, a servant of a chaver who gets sold to an Am Haaretz. Einam tzrichen lekabel divrei chaveros lichatchila. They do not need, if they go back and remarry into being a chaver, they do not need to reaffirm that they're keeping their chaverus status because they were already involved in it and they could be presumed to be continuing. Rabbi says, Rabbi Yehuda says, they've got to accept it again. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon Elazar said the same thing. There was a story of one lady. She was married to a chaver. She used to help him tie his tefillin. Right? He needed help putting his tefillin on. His wife used to help put his tefillin on him. And then, Nises Lemoches, she then got married to a not nice guy, a guy who was a tax collector. And what did she do? She helped him tie his tax receipts to help him collect his taxes. Bottom line, wherever the household is like, the lady of the household will get involved in that kind of activity. Amar Rav says that the way to remember those things that non-Jews, that you need double seals, right? Chavis, the word chavis means a barrel. There's a acronym, Ches Beis Yud Taf, which we're going to explain. Those are all aser bechosem echad. In all of these circumstances, all of these products, if it only has one seal on it, you can't trust it. It's not considered to be kosher. We would presume the non-Jew broke open the seal, did something, tampered it, and then reclosed it again. But champag, if it comes from champag, these four products, mutter bechosem echad, that you only need one seal. And what are the four products that need a double seal? Chalav, milk, basar, meat, yayin, wine, and techelas. All of those are asur bechosem echad. They're not allowed with one seal. Chiltis, and the ones that are acceptable with one seal is chiltis, which was the fish that we talked about. Morius, which was the chopped up fish that we discussed, that we didn't want them to put wine in. Pas, bread, and gavina, and the cheese. Mutar b'chos mecha. They're all fine with one seal. Tomorrow, we will pick this up, and we will go through each of these products and explain why they would be more likely to break open a seal on the first four products, but not on the second four products. So that's
beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Loiterman.
Yeah.
Shkoya, that was fantastic.
Jeff, whoever has a Gemara with the shul should try maybe bring them home soon because we're almost done with this.
Yeah. Well, you need your volume 2, right?
Yeah, it's about
So I might be able to get it to you tomorrow. I think I might be popping by the shul.
It's in my locker. You know what I mean?
I know where to find it.
Definitely, we got to try to push to finish the parak tomorrow. So hopefully by the new parak will be not tomorrow, but the next day.
That sounds like a plan. Okay.